So welcome folks to our new councillors and those returning to what will hopefully be a different way of doing business. Just want to start off by reminding Tom and Grant that sort of laughter before the meeting's not an appropriate way to go forward, he says jokingly. Look, we've got quite a bit of an agenda to get through today. First thing we're going to do is do the swearing in process for Rangi and for Leslie, so we'll do that shortly. And then we've got quite a long level of work to get through, particularly around the standing orders and the codes of conduct and the likes. So Michael's going to sit at the top of the table for about 4 or 5 hours as we do that. It's my intention that we go through page by page. It doesn't mean that we need to read every page, just needs to be given an opportunity for anybody that might want to contribute to something they see that's new, because there are quite a bit of changes coming into the standing orders and into the code of conduct process as well, and the subsequent paper at the end of the meeting that deals with the mana whenua roles. So we just work our way through that. So I guess we've got 2 apologies at this stage, which is Alex and Rhea are both away.
Moved.
Thank you. Thank you. Any opposition to that? None at all. So be it. Moving on. You're too quick for me, Darren. Sorry. Yes, I'll put that motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. And we'll also do our swearing in now, do you think? I might just go down where Leslie is, be the best place for that. Leslie, you have the honour of doing this week. Requires the new battle.
I declare that I will faithfully and impartially, and according to the best of my skill and judgment, execute and perform, in the best interests of the Invercargill City, the powers, authorities and duties vested in or imposed upon me as an elected member of the Invercargill City Council by virtue of the Local Government Act 2002, the Local Government Official Information and Meeting Act 1987, or any other act. So help me God.
Excellent. Signature there is all it's required. Welcome back to the madhouse.
Thank you.
Rangi, if I can get up there with that.
I declare that I will faithfully and impartially, and according to the best of my skill and judgment, execute and perform in the best interests of the Invercargill City Council the powers, authorities, duties vested in or imposed upon me as an elected member of the Invercargill City Council by virtue of the Local Government Act 2002, the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987, or any other act.
It's a reminder at the start of the agenda.
But we don't need to just sit with us. So are there any declarations of interest that we need to be aware of, people, that we don't already know about? There being none. Oh, so we just need to move and have a seconder that we receive the declaration of the Mayor and Councillors.
Happy to move the 3 motions.
Yep, thank you.
Seconded.
Yep, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Probably better for me to work off that one, I think. Okay, the Mayor's report to the Inaugural Council. So it's recommended that we receive that report, and they have some other recommendations that go with it. So I'm going to have somebody move that initially, I guess, on the first point that we receive the report.
I'll move that.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favour? Thank you very much. So this report now, I guess, goes through some of the appointments that have been made under my delegated authority. And so it's important that we work our way through there to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the appointments and with the membership of the councils. So I guess we've read those. Any points to be raised?
This is the appointment.
To the appointments?
There's a spelling mistake under infrastructure. The third, second councillor for the bottom. I think it should be councillor Skate.
That's right.
Don't mind that.
I'm sure you don't. So Peter, you declared an interest on that committee?
Sorry?
Did you declare an interest on that committee?
No, sorry.
No, I mean, no,
There's a
spelling
spelling
mistake.
error.
It's a
Oh,
spelling. Councillor Scout spelling. His name.
It's not on that.
Two names, yeah.
It's on board books.
Oh, okay.
Skate.
Yep. Thank you.
Well, that's what I go on.
Yep.
Thank you.
So there being no further discussion on
Your Worship.
Mayor will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Worship, I'm just interested in the Finance and Projects Committee, which is obviously a very busy committee with very wide-ranging responsibilities.
Yes.
And the fact that it's only listed here with 6 members,
Yes.
whereas the others have 8, 9 and 10.
Sure. Yeah, I can explain that. And I accept that you weren't here when we had the initial discussion about it. It was very much my wish that for the 2 peripheral committees, which are Finance and Projects and Risk and Assurance, that we had people on those committees that had a desire to be there. They're quite unique areas to work in. And so I didn't necessarily want to get 8 or 9 or 10 people on there, only to find that they had people there that weren't interested in that sort of work. The 2 main committees clearly is where the bulk of the work will be in council. So at this stage we've got 6 plus myself, because I'll be on that committee as well. So unless I get people to put their hand up and say yes, I'd like to be involved, I don't want to force that issue. So you can see the numbers in there. I don't want people just making up numbers.
I do apologise, Mayor Clark. I thought I had indicated I would be interested to be on that committee.
Oh, well, that's easily added then. So I think I had you on the Risk and Assurance as well.
Yes.
So you want to
Yes,
be on
I'm
both?
happy to be on both.
Excellent, thank you. Any other issues with the appointments that have been made there? Or any further discussion? Nothing?
So if
Okay.
you're looking for a motion, Mayor Clark, I'm happy to move 2, 3, 4 and 5 with the addition of Councillor Soper into the Finance and Projects Committee.
Yep, excellent, thank you for that. A seconder?
Yes, I can second that.
Yep, thank you. Any further discussion about that? There being none, I put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Right.
Any dissension? There being none, it's done business.
Not a vote against, Mayor Clark, just a question. Over what time period do you want to go and fill those other positions, the council appointees to other organisations?
Yes, we'd held off on that because Councillor Soper's away and Councillor Crackett's away and Councillor Bond's away, and very much wanted to not appoint people where they weren't feeling comfortable, and to make sure that we had a fair sharing of the workload or of the interest. So I've delayed that off. I think when I was talking to Claire, we were talking about middle November. Yeah, they're a couple of weeks away. Just want to make sure everybody's back and everybody gets a say in what they'd like to do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification. All right, moving on to the adoption of standing orders. Oh, sorry. my error.
You might not want that item.
What?
Statutory responsibilities.
So we've got a report there that refers to the statutory responsibilities of members. And it just requires that the council receive this report. Somebody would like to move that?
Happy to move that.
Thank
Mayor
you,
Clark.
councillor. Seconder?
I can second that.
Yep, thank you. Any discussion around the report? Now that we've got Michael here to give his words of wisdom.
No, thank you, Mayor Clark. This is simply a summary of what has been presented to the councillors at the induction program, and with the addition of Mr. Donnelly's report that he presented last week. Yes. So no, unless there are any specific questions around these responsibilities, I'm very happy to leave it at that.
Any questions? There being none, you've done a good job. Would somebody like to move the adoption of that report?
I'll move, Chair.
Thank you. Seconded. Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Carried. Now on to the larger report, which I've tried to get to twice now, but which is the adoption of standing orders. This is quite a long report, and so I'd like to move through it in an orderly way, and as we work through the pages, it would be helpful if people indicate if they've got issues that they want to do. I've got, as you can imagine, a whole lot, so bear with me as I try to work through what I've got to raise and also work my way through it. But the recommendations are that we receive the report, and that we resolve to either include or exclude from standing orders the ability for the chairperson of a meeting to have the casting vote. So it's we agree with that or we don't agree with that. And then adopts standing orders for the period of 2022 through to 2025, and there's an appendix attached to that. So if you're on board books and you start out on page 19, we'll just work our way through those. So if we go to page 20, just for members to let me know if there's anything in page 20 that they're of concern, I'll just work my way through. Page 21.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, now the casting vote, we talk about that now? That's on page 20.
Yep, we could do. Yes, happy to talk to that.
Look, it's my understanding that the casting vote thing, that if you didn't have it and it was a tie in the committee, then the status quo would prevail.
Yep.
If it was a change. But if you come, my question is, if it was a vote like we had last council where you're deciding on either option 2 for the museum or option 3, and it's something new, and you're at a stalemate then with even numbers, what would be the way of that would be sorted?
Yep. I'll get Michael to give us some advice on that, because if we don't have the casting vote, what would happen if we had a split vote?
Essentially, the motion to pass needs a majority.
Yep.
If there's no majority in the event of a tie, the motion is lost.
Lost on a tie.
Lost on the tie. So it has to be a majority. If there's no casting vote, then it is lost on a tie because it is even, therefore the motion is deemed to be lost.
Yep.
In the event, as Councillor Pottinger was speaking of, where there was a course of 2 actions, the motion would either be lost or it could be moved into, and further discussion could be taken place at a later meeting with further information provided by staff if that was required. So there's some options, but just a quick précis, this was something that LGNZ has suggested that we talk about at each meeting at the adoption of standing orders as something that each council needs to make a call on. It's something that is considered a legacy to give the chair a casting vote. It's not considered part of a modern council, but a number of councils still find it very useful to have in the event of those tiebreakers. So quick précis on that point.
Yep. I think in some organisations, or when they've got a split vote without a majority, they sometimes go back to have another bite of the cherry at a later stage to sort of try and lobby colleagues to shift their positions. And I'm not sure that's a healthy process for us. But then there are always arguments against the casting vote of the chair as well. That can be contentious as well. So I'll just leave it at that and we'll work our way through, Rangi, and we can come back to that when we come to the vote
Oh,
about
yeah.
having some further discussion about that. So working our way forward through, just stop me at any stage you want to clarify, I think, on page 20. Nothing at all. Page 21. You'll notice later on in the standing orders there are provisions around speaking te reo at meetings. And so the chair has some discretionary rights around that. Notice has to be given to do that. It can't just be automatically done. And the chair can also ask for some translation as well. Or we could have an interpreter. So the option's there. So I'm just signaling that there are provisions further on in this around that. So moving on to pages 23 and beyond, we start into the meat, I guess, of the report. So coming forward onto page 27 is where the provisions start to prevail as you go through. Nothing there so far. I'm working my way through those definitions to start with. I think a lot of the stuff is well known to members. So on page 36 of board books, you'll see this is where the issues around the ability to speak English, te reo or sign language kicks in, and the notice period, and also that the chair has some abilities to manage that speaking in te reo as well. As you're scrolling forward, which I know you're all doing, just alert me if we come to anything that you might want to raise. A lot of the stuff is just standard that we've had before. I'm hearing nothing. I'm up to about 50 now, 52. So for me on page 53, we have some issues around members' right to attend meetings. Draw your attention to that. So on the top of 53, it talks about apologies. And it says all apologies must be provided to the chair, chief executive, or governance and legal team prior to a meeting. We've had some discussion already about that in our early stages. And it was a suggestion that people that wish to make an apology should do so to the mayor, or in the absence of being able to contact the mayor, to the deputy mayor. And it's been my observation last time around, it makes it really hard for chairs who are trying to set up a meeting and get things organised here to get a last minute telephone call that comes through a third party about why they're an apology. And we had this discussion a couple of weeks ago about our desire to keep the apologies low if we can, and encourage people to attend meetings. So I just wonder what you think about that second sentence, which is all apologies must come through one of three options. Open for discussion on that, especially from the chairs themselves. I'll pick on you, Darren.
Yep. Thanks, Matt Clark. I guess just to reaffirm that it is really useful as soon as possible to let the chair know if you're going to be an apology, because there have been times that we've had to scratch around to make sure that we've had a quorum.
Yep.
So the last minute ones, look, if something happens at the last minute, that's fine. But the earlier we get them, the easier it makes it for us to prepare for a meeting. So
you're still happy for it to be in the chair role from a governance perspective, or should it come to the mayor or deputy mayor?
I think chair for the meeting. So if it was listed as the mayor, you might be away.
Yep.
So whoever is running the meeting should be the person that it would go to. So for full council, obviously, be you. Or...
So given your long standing in this role, how easy is it to decline an attempt to have an apology if you think it's not appropriate?
I guess the only time we've declined apologies is when they've not come from the person themselves.
Okay.
Somebody else has noted that someone's missing and lodged an apology on their behalf. That's not really an apology. I haven't really struck anything where we've declined an apology.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Rangi.
Look, I totally agree with that part, but what I'd like to bring to the attention is, as chair, when you're sitting up there and it's 3 minutes to 3, and you're looking around the table and there are elected members missing, and you haven't heard an apology, I find that quite frustrating. And then all of a sudden, at 1 minute to 3 people walk in. I don't think that's acceptable, because I'm writing my run sheet out, and I've got their names written down as apologies. So I think, as courtesy, and this is up to yourself, that I think for meetings that elected members be here, 10 minutes before, so you've got an idea of what's happening. I think it's not out of the, it's not going to really muck up someone's day to be here 10 minutes before the meeting. So that I just like to make that quite clear, because it is quite confusing. Darren, I don't know if you strike that,
It's a courtesy thing. I guess it makes it easier for each elected representative as well to be settled in and ready for the meeting. Trish and I were having a conversation just prior to this, going, well, how early is too early?
Well, poor old Pony has been here all day, but that's...
Chair, since standing orders allow for apologies to be offered at the meeting, particularly for lateness or for having to leave early, I think really that means that the chair has to be able to, committee chair really has to be able to accept the apology. Just from a practical perspective.
Alan, were you wanting to contribute to that?
No, I'm cool.
You're cool?
I agree with
We know you're
It's
cool.
not a bad idea.
Leslie.
A bit earlier.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I don't disagree. I'll just point out that there are some cases, such as my own potential appearance at a court proceeding, which can mean that there is no possibility other than walking in with only a couple of minutes to spare. And I think people do understand that. It does happen on occasion. I certainly, in my position, legally try to make sure that it doesn't, but there are always cases when court processes run over time.
Okay.
Well, I think in that case, if you are going to be, running to the wire, that it would be handy to know. And then I'm not assuming that it's an apology. Otherwise, you're still guessing.
Sort of like half an apology for lateness, half an apology.
That can be difficult, of course, because you have no idea until the court proceeding is underway whether it will run over the specified time. So I'm just pointing out there could be a difficulty there in particular cases, and it's not only.
Look, these standing orders are not necessarily to hold people to a pure account. It's just a guideline for how we operate.
It's very difficult to make a phone call when you're in a court proceeding.
Sure, understand that. Well, if there's no
I guess a lot of us here have other jobs besides being councillors, and if I knew that whatever I was doing had the potential of interfering with me arriving at 3 o'clock, I'd forewarn the chair, just as a possibility, rather than have to do it during, that period of time. I think it's one of those things that if we knew you were in court, that would be great. And we know you're in town and you're only a block away, but how would the chair know otherwise? And I'm just raising that. We all have, other work, and I think if I was going to be running late, I'd be letting the chair know well in advance, just in case it happened.
So I guess it's just something we try and manage as we go through. It causes some itch at the moment. So you've got that, Michael, that we just leave that as a status quo?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Going forward now, as I'm rolling through the pages, stop me where you need to stop me. I'll get on quickly onto page 55, because I'll get in ahead of Leslie and say there's actually a spelling mistake there. So one of the sentences right down there at the bottom, it says ID the deputy chair, and it should say if the deputy chair. Just a spelling there. One of the things that we've got in this section 14.2, it refers to the chair or deputy chair, and we don't actually have any deputy chairs anymore. So our intention early on was that where a chair couldn't make a meeting, that the deputy mayor would take over the chairmanship of that role. So and that's just something for you to be aware of, Michael. Claire, I hear a sigh there. Did you want? Oh no, it's all right. During this document, there's quite a bit of, and this is something historical that you might be help us with, Darren. Quite a few places it says where the chairperson stands, the person that's speaking who is standing needs to sit down. Well, we don't operate that way anymore.
We haven't had to.
No, but if you wanted to stop a debate which you thought was getting out of control, or give some guidance to where it's going, would you physically stand up to do that, or would you speak a bit louder, or what would you do?
I think it's a matter of degrees.
Yep.
And that you would measure how much attention you had of whoever it was that you were wanting to pause, and if they weren't, then you accelerate your volume.
Yep.
And if that doesn't work, there's a gavel, which you can either bang or toss.
It's around here something.
Carefully, of course, not at the person. Or the last option is to rise. But actually, it's been so long since I've seen anybody do that, I'm not sure that people would have recognised that when the chair rises, all business is expected.
Yeah, especially if I stood up, then no one would know the difference.
I wasn't going to say anything. You're my height.
But just on that, Mr. Mayor, the gavel was no longer there. We had to remove it
What?
when the additional screens for Zoom were added, unfortunately.
You could put it here somewhere, I'm sure. But okay, that's fine.
It's a sidearm.
So it might be, Michael, that there are several places where that's recorded about the standing, but we might just want to tweak that a little bit, just so, because it refers that you should be seated and then not speak when the chair's doing it. Just the not speak would be the way forward, I would think.
Yep, thank you, Mayor Clark. Very happy to adjust that to the modern era.
Yep, and there's quite a few places that occurs. So unless there's any objection, we'll move on to up to page 65, and we come to the contentious issue of electronic devices at meetings.
Chair, excuse me, but before you get to 65, I have a question on page 64.
Yep.
So 21.5, the last phrase there says maybe subject to standing order 20.6. I think it's meant to be 21.6.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on again to 21.11, which is electronic devices. Look, we've had a considerable amount of discussion in the last term around the use of electronic devices in the chamber. We've had people that are obviously away on some other business, and you'll be aware of that. We've had potentially people contacting members by way of technology, and that could be influencing the democratic process. But then we have people who have children as well who need to keep their phones open. So my view on that, and I'm open to having some discussion about that, is the status quo should remain, but that we have an eye cast across this, that if it gets out of line, we will just tighten up the provisions around the technology, because it can interfere. And it doesn't look good if people are seen to be prompting other people during a debate. So I see some nodding around the table, but if anybody's not comfortable with that, now's the time to say.
I'd agree with that, Mayor Clark. I think there have been times where, I'm running a business, so occasionally I've had to fire off a quick message, but we have been notified by members of the public expressing concern about the amount of time that some people are spending on devices. That's no longer an issue for that person, but it's just something that we need to be aware of.
Yep. The opening paragraph on this is the key, that it's okay to be used for the advancement of the business. So, I mean, I've sat in this chamber and we've been discussing things, and 5 seconds later, Rangi pipes up and he's got online somewhere and pulled out some legislation for us. And that's quite helpful at times to have that sort of people that are fast on technology. And Alex is another one that can do that as well, to draw that forward. It helps the business run. But once it goes into other parameters, it's not so good. So, yep, thanks.
Mr. Mayor,
yes, Peter.
I find it very hard to hear what you're saying at times.
Yep.
Just getting back to cell phone, I didn't hear what, you're not allowed to have these here any longer?
No. The what it says in that provision is that you can use a cell phone in the chamber for advancing the business. So if you were wanting to jump into some piece of legislation and draw it up on your cell phone, that's fine. We don't mind urgent business. I know you've got a wife that's very unwell. Alex has got a child that she sometimes needs to keep in contact. That's okay too. But we don't want people prompting themselves across the table to talk to other people by way of cell phone during a debate. It doesn't look good. Or to be online, say for argument's sake, watching the
The Melbourne Cup?
The Melbourne Cup, yes. I just thought that was rather appropriate. You mentioned that for Peter.
5 o'clock.
Yeah, 5 o'clock. Could still be here. So at this stage, we're just going to leave it the way it is, Peter, status quo.
Yep, thank you.
But if it gets beyond, it's something we need to monitor.
Yep, thank you very much.
I think it's
Darren.
worth pointing out, Mayor Clark, that for the new councillors, that if you've got a phone and you put it on vibrate, please don't leave it lying on the table,
Yeah.
because it vibrates on the table, goes straight up the mic stands and those who are zooming, and it's all they can hear. Stick it in your pocket, it's kind of comforting.
So that's all heavy. Going forward on to page 66 for me. In 22.6, there are a couple of things here I'm personally not comfortable about. It's around the provision, and some of them have been here, some of the other members have been here for a while will know about this provision, which sort of determines that if 3 people have spoken consecutively in support of something, then you can call for a motion to close the discussion down, I guess, for want of better words. But it does allow the chair to open up the opposition stuff as well. One thing I'm uncomfortable about that is, and we've had this exercise before, is that there are 2 things really. You don't want discussions to go on forever and a day, but there are times when we want to hear from every voice at the table. It's important on some of the things, like Three Waters, a good example, around the mandate, passport mandates that we had. It was important from a democratic perspective to hear every voice. And so I think somehow that needs to be worded that allows for that. And when I looked at Michael, where it says the chairperson must put the motion, just changing that to the word may put the motion gives the chair some discretion again. So I'd be interested to know what other members have to think about that. I found that a little bit uncomfortable at times. Yeah, Darren?
Look, I'd agree with that interpretation. I think there are times when it has been useful that if we've got people speaking all in the same direction for the sake of almost hearing their own voices, it hasn't helped. But on those contentious issues, doing a round table, you just drop that count and continue around.
Sure. Oh,
Mayor Clark?
yeah, sure.
I
How about you,
absolutely
Leslie?
agree with that. Sorry.
No, you're right.
I believe that we do need to be able to hear all the voices if possible, and we would then expect you as chair to manage the conversation.
Yeah. Look, a lot of the business we do doesn't require lots of voices. A lot of it can be quite mundane stuff, but there are some stuff where the committee wants to hear what we individually have to think on the issue. Leslie.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I suppose the only slight caveat I put onto changing that particular must to may is that it says the chairperson must put the motion after the mover's right of reply.
Yep.
Normally the right of reply would trigger the motion to be put because it's the last speaker.
Yep.
So it may be that there needs to be some extra sentence. If there is no speaker to the contrary, the chairperson will repeat the call before asking the mover to give their right of reply.
Sure.
There may be some way to word it to account for the fact that the mover's right of reply is usually the last speech. Full stop.
So my understanding of that, Michael, is that after you've had 3 speakers, regardless of whether there's any to the contrary or not, the mover has the right to reply even to those that are in the affirmative who are agreeing with it. That's the way I understand it.
Yes.
But it's just at what stage do we trigger it, and is there any discretion in it? Because at this stage there doesn't seem to be. And I think it would be helpful if that was left to a chair to decide.
So at this stage, that provision doesn't provide for discretion. Once that happens, then that is what happens. The only way around it would be to seek to suspend standing orders, which also leads to its own problems as you're then trying to manage the rest of the meeting.
Sure.
So yes, there would be a way to word it.
Yep.
Chair,
Sorry, Nigel, were you wanting some input there? Did you want some input into that? Did you have your... No? Just having a scratch? Yeah, Tom.
Chair, as I understand, the issue is that you're concerned that at the moment it implies that only 3 speakers can speak. I think the second sentence actually deals with a completely different point, but rather than 3, you just need to put several and leave it to the chair to decide that point.
Yeah. Well, the way I understand it, and others have been here much longer than me can clarify this, the 3 speakers are in support of one position. So they're either affirmative or the opposed. There's the option for then another 3 to come in on the other side of the debate. So that's 6. Well, we've got 13 elected members here. That means half your people are not getting a say. And so, I just wanted us to consider that option because it can be used as a tool to close down some debates at times. Yeah, Darren.
So I guess by way of explanation from how things have been able to happen, anytime somebody changes the direction of the argument, there's a reset.
Yeah.
So you could have 3-4, 1 against, then you can go back to another 3-4. But actually the way it's worded here is sufficient because it says on line 2, the chairperson may call for a speaker to the contrary, or they may not. It might be one of those examples where we want to go around the table. In which case, the wording as it is sufficient. So I guess it's a matter of how we interpret that.
Michael, do you want to give some thoughts on that?
No, so I think always with all pieces of legislation or quasi-legislation, there are lots of ways you can interpret it. In this case, Councillor Ludlow is right. You do have that reset, but the wording there is that the chairperson must, if there's no speaker to the contrary, so you carry on with that pattern, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every elected voice is going to be heard. If there are 3 people against and the rest of the elected members are going to be for, unless you manage to space that out. I think there is some wording that we can put in there to help achieve the aim of enabling all councillors to have a discussion, but giving the chair the ability to control that meeting. And if a motion is put on this point saying, look, they've been sufficient, this needs to end, there are other ways around that. So like a closure motion, for example, is the appropriate way to end a debate that is going around the table.
So a question of clarification, if I may, Mayor Clark. It says that the chair may call for a speaker to the contrary, but what if the chair doesn't?
Yeah. And so the chair, as you'll know, Councillor Ludlow, as a very experienced chair, the chair has the authority to determine how that meeting is to be run. If the chair decides not to, then the chair's ruling is final.
So that current wording works then?
If the chair's intention is to not call for any further discussion, then yes. But if the chair's intention is to enable everybody to discuss and there are procedural points being raised, understanding orders, that makes it difficult for the chair to control those other than having to deal with each procedural point, including things like closure motions.
Thank you. And I guess if I use the vaccination passport, Mayor Clark, as an example, I chaired that meeting and I did point out at the beginning of the process that I would be going around the table and expecting all councillors. So there you've clearly stated an intention to not follow a 3-4-3 against process. Or alternatively say that I plan on following standing orders, which is the 3-4.
Having said that, I've also been subject to a group who might be speaking to a certain position, and then we've had other members that say, well, you've gone past your 3 quota now. Suggest that we have some sort of closure to it, unless there's people wanting to speak an option. And that's what I want to avoid, not using that too often, because I think it's important that we don't have the same voices all the time. It's important we have robust debates where they're needed. So I'm open to whatever you think. Leslie.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering if to try and move things forward, because that does say the chairperson may call for a speaker to the contrary, and what we're trying to do is elicit all opinions of those who have not yet spoken. Would it be a simple addition to say the chairperson may call for a speaker to the contrary, or ask for an opinion from those who have not yet spoken? Would that clarify what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, when I look at the if you look at the spread the flow chart that's on page 84 of board books, it's got it clarifies how we deal with that. And as it comes down, it says motions discussed. If 3 consecutive speakers in support or opposition, the chairperson may call for a speaker to the contrary. So if he or she does that, and there are none, and then it says, and if there are none, the motion shall be put to the vote.
After the right of reply.
Yep, after the right of reply, which is the initial. And I would have thought there, if we use the word may instead of shall, it gives that discretion. to say, okay, we've heard 3 in favour. Anybody opposed? No, there's no. Is there anybody still in favour that would like to speak? But that doesn't help. That provision doesn't quite help that. Yep. Rangi.
Look, previous terms I've been on, especially the early ones, the use of suspending suspension of standing orders was often used when it was something like that vaccination passport thing. That was used a couple of times, but Michael raises an interesting point. If you suspend standing orders, then you're throwing all your rules out, including if it was depending on what we choose on the casting vote, standing orders. That's part of standing order.
So the correct way of going through it is to name the standing order that you plan on suspending.
So that's right. You would actually suspend the voting one, and that can easily be done. Which is that.
You just need to remember which one it is.
Yeah. So I think the chairperson's ability to do that, suspend that particular order. How would that work, Michael?
It can be a request from any member.
But doesn't that have to be done at the start of a meeting if you're going to suspend standing orders?
Can be. I've seen it done just for that particular discussion.
It's something that can be done before each item, if required, and the governance team are always here, so we'll be able to point out to you this specific standing order if you let us know what you're seeking to achieve.
Okay. I'm picking up the consensus around it. We just leave it the way it is, but the chairs be aware of their ability to suspend standing orders on particular items if they want to allow for further debate if that becomes an issue with those that don't want the further debate. Yep. Okay. It's all good. Good luck with remembering what standing order you need to suspend. So this report goes on right up to...
sorry, before you leave page 66, Chair, if I may.
Sure.
22.5, the heading is members may speak only once. Actually, the two sentences that follow that, the first one says that you cannot speak without the permission of the chairperson, and the second sentence says you may speak with the permission of the chairperson. Both sentences actually say exactly the same thing, and both sentences say that you can speak more than once with the chairman's permission. So I'm not really clear what to be honest, I'm not clear what the purpose of it is at all, because the effect, the heading should be members may speak more than once with the chairman's permission.
Michael.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the purpose of that is that members can only speak once. That is the rule. However, as we've discussed already today, the chairperson has the discretion to enable all sorts of things under standing orders, and that includes allowing members to speak again. So the starting point is always essentially, as just discussed, you get one bite at the cherry. So that's your chance to say everything you want to say. It's to stop people constantly going back and say, it's get it out, say what you need to say, and then if you've got a valid reason for needing to add something, the chairperson can grant you that dispensation, but it's a benefit or a gift from the chair as opposed to a right. But I also agree, the second sentence is superfluous, so we'll probably delete that.
Like it's been my experience that the chairs that I've come in contact with in the last term have allowed people to bounce back a little bit. Sometimes you hear a little bit more information and it makes you question again, but it can be messy if the chairs don't control it for sure. I don't have any other issues on the standing orders, but if others do, now's the time to raise as we go forward.
So it's possibly useful, Mayor Clark, for me just to remind everybody about the quorum rules with Zoom. That Zoom now no longer counts for quorum, so you need to be in this room. And that was only a temporary measure under the COVID legislation, and that has now lapsed. So it would be helpful to remind everybody of that.
Excellent. No further debate. Would somebody like to move the three motions we got there and to give us an indication on option 2 of which they'd like to have the include or exclude the casting vote of the chair? Yeah, Barry. You would. So what would you prefer on the include exclude? Do you want the chair to have that casting vote or not in the motion you're putting forward?
I think he should do.
Should do. Okay. So would somebody like to second that?
I'll second that.
Thank you. So it might be helpful just to do these three independently, or somebody suggest that we do two separately. So if you want to have a vote on that, if there's any dissension to that. Yep, thank you, Leslie. Looking for a seconder.
Yes.
Yep, thank you. So if we do just 1 and 3 together at this stage, so we can come back to 2. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any opposition? Excellent, thank you for that. And on the issue of 2 that we've also got on the table, is there. So the motion is to include the casting vote with the chair, which is what we do at the moment. So I'll put that to the vote as well. Oh, sorry, Leslie.
Are you going to allow speakers on that?
I will do. Absolutely. Yes, you're welcome to speak on that.
Thank you. I'm not wedded to either position, but I'm just conscious that we are trying in this term to be a very collegial council, and I do just want to bring up so that everybody has thought about the fact that if we are in a position where a casting vote would traditionally be used under, as our advisor has pointed out, very old standing order rules, that it may be that this council would feel it was more productive to allow some more time for that decision to be reinvestigated, more information to be collected, and that may be a more productive collegial approach than a casting vote to be used. So I just want people to have considered that particular aspect of moving into a new era with a new council.
So I appreciate that, and certainly from my perspective, and I'd hope the chairs would go down this track as well, that where we have very contentious decision making, and we've had some of that in the past where the chairs casting votes really split the council down the middle, that we would not necessarily go down the path of using a casting vote, that we could just adjourn it to give ourselves more time to think about the positions. I think that would be a healthy process. Now, whether you'd want to write that in somewhere, or whether it would just be an understanding that the chairs could use themselves, I think that would be a good thing to do. So having heard that, the resolution is to include the casting vote option for the chairperson. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any opposition? Yep,
Yes.
Leslie, you want that recorded?
Thank you. On that particular matter, yes.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. Well, that's carried. All right, now we move on to the adoption of the Code of Conduct. Bear with me as I get to that. So we have 3 sets of recommendations there that we received the report, which is the Code of Conduct 2022, that we revoke the equivalent in 2016, and we adopt the code as set out in Appendix A. So again, I'll just work my way through that, and people are welcome at this stage before we put the motion to bring up some issues. So stop me if I get too far ahead. On page 93 of Board Books and 94, I've got some opposition myself to the provision under the new code that's been proposed to allow a member of the public to lodge a code of conduct. So I think back into the last term, I think around the vaccine mandation and around the groundswell opposition we got around Three Waters, we could open ourselves up to literally hundreds of these things. And even if we have a fast track preliminary system, which is in here to do that, I think that for me, that goes a step too far. So just throw that open for discussion. And
Concur.
yep, thank you. Yeah, Rangi.
Yeah, I would agree, considering that the Code of Conduct is for the CE and the elected members. So it doesn't actually include, we don't expect the public to behave, but yeah, you know, like it has to work both ways. And, and being members, this applies to them.
Yep. Anybody else want to discuss on that? Michael, I understand that suggestion of the members of the public came through LGNZ.
It's something that LGNZ has been raising as something that can be discussed in Code of Conducts, and it's also from personal experience of the last term for my team, and just noticing Code of Conduct issues. It's a suggestion. If the council is not comfortable with it, then we can be directed to remove their ability.
Yep. Rangi.
I think if there was an issue with an elected member or something like that, the first port of call would be yourself.
Yep.
You represent the council, and if someone had an issue, then you've got an open door policy. So
look, I've had those sorts of emails already.
Yeah.
A couple of occasions they've been about staff members, and I've just taken them to Claire and said, "This is the feedback I'm getting. I don't interfere with the process. It's just for her eyes only." So that's a good way forward. On page 94, you'll notice that as part of this process, Michael and Claire have attempted to make our response to complaints a little bit more effective. What we've had in the past, for those who haven't been here, is that when a code of conduct is lodged, it gets processed through to an investigator. So there's two issues about the investigation. The investigator does the primary investigation to decide whether there's any material cause to be worried about. If not, it comes back. If there is some material cause, it goes forward for a full investigation. The downside of that is that, one, there's cost involved, two, there's time involved, and three, there's a perception that an investigator has a fiscal incentive in some people's eyes to actually go to the full investigation as opposed to the primary one. And so I think it's quite a healthy process that we've come to, saying the initial investigation, which is referred to as the primary investigation or assessment, should be done away from the full investigation to see whether it's something that can be resolved internally, and then we've got mechanisms for that, and whether it's okay. For me, I have some unease about that initial primary assessment being done by our legal team, which is Michael's team. I think when you have a staff member potentially deciding on conflict between councillors, or potentially between a councillor and the chief executive, it puts the staff member in an invidious position. So one thing I've suggested to both Michael and to Claire in the days leading up to this is that I'd like to see that go out to Preston Russell Law, and that we have one designated partner there that deals with these preliminary investigations. One of the issues that we had with the previous setup we had was that it's a bit of a lolly scramble who you get to do the investigation. We had a panel of 4 or 5 people, or alternatively, some may not be available and you end up with one person doing it. And there didn't seem to be some consistency of the way the approach was done to it, depending on who the investigator was. For those who were here last term, you'll know that we had the Local Government Commission come around, and one of the issues that they raised was having a more localised input into the preliminary area, which is what we're now looking for. And secondly, to have standardised regional people that would invest instead of buying somebody from Wellington or Auckland because of the cost factors, and also that they would give some steer to the government on what the penalty should be, because some of the penalties are described as a wet bus ticket, as you know. And so we had some bad examples of that last term. And so this, to me, steps in the right direction, but having the internal staff members do it, I'm uneasy about that. So I'm opening that up for discussion. Holy hell. I was going to say, not everybody can be agreeing with me, surely not. Yeah, Tom.
I'll comment. I mean, it seems the obvious thing is that the preliminary investigator must be a different person than the independent investigator at the later stage. You give 2 separate people.
Yep.
I would support what you're proposing, that even the initial assessment should be done externally.
Yep. Anybody else want to contribute to that? Yeah, Darren?
So I've got a contrary view in that I think for the initial investigation, which is simply to determine whether or not there is something to be investigated, is something that I feel I can have faith in our staff and their professionalism to deal with. They're just making a call as to, look, this is a substantial matter or not. And if it's a substantial matter, then it goes outside the building.
So just make one comment to that. I'm not trying to downcry what you've just said. One of the things I discussed with Michael early on today was, or it might have been yesterday, was the fact that as we go further through this process, there's no appeal right within our process against what the preliminary investigator decides. So if you felt aggrieved, if I lodged a complaint against Claire, for argument's sake, because I thought something she'd done was not appropriate, and then Michael investigates it and rules in favour of Claire, I've got nowhere to go with that, and I might feel aggrieved, or I might feel, well, it's one of her senior staff, he's not going to do it. Now, that's no reflection on Michael, and I've told him it's nothing personal to him or his team, but a lot of this is about perception of fairness, and when you get into things like personal grievances, it's very much process driven, so that people feel as though they get a fair shake, because as we move on in this, you'll see there's some things further in the process that need to be looked at as well. Trish?
I support Tom's point of view. I think we've got to eliminate any kind of risk that we can. And I think, while I understand what Darren's saying, I think it would be, what seems to me, it would be better to do it outside straight away.
So, any other debate on that? Discussion? Yeah, Leslie.
Thank you. I wonder whether it is worth putting in the alternative, because every time reference to Preston Russell may end up being an expensive option we do not necessarily need to always access if it is a complaint that could be dealt with by our internal team at preliminary assessment. So I tend to think it's probably an either or. There will be some cases where your view is indeed the correct one and it is better to have the totally independent view from the start. There will be other cases where it is quite appropriate that it's an internal assessment.
Somebody else had their hand up there? Yeah, Alan.
I was going to say, if you have a situation like Councillor Sophie is talking about, where you actually have discretion,
Yep.
whether you do or don't, well then you're back to square one, aren't you? So you've got to have a clear path. You either do or you don't, in my view. And I actually agree with Tom and yourself, Trish.
Yep.
That I think you should involve an outside external thing straight away, because it's basically well, not an employment issue, but it's close to an employment issue.
Still here?
Oh, sorry, Peter.
Yeah, I did have my hand up. That's okay. Yeah, I was going to also suggest that we use the city solicitor.
Yep. Okay. Michael, I'll give you a chance to. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Scout.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Nigel.
I just wonder about the degree of where we're at. So perhaps you could give us a couple of examples, Michael, in the sense of the low end and then the higher end of where we might not act, because pretty sure that we're not too concerned about someone borrowing some biscuits from the tea caddy or whatever.
We know who that was.
Yeah, we know who that is.
Yeah, we do. But Michael, I just think we need to be careful here, because we're running off to a legal firm on something that could be dealt with quite simply internally. So perhaps a couple of examples would be good for everybody. Could you give us a couple?
No, absolutely. So I'll just quickly preface that by the intention of this was to try and cut some of that cost down.
Sure.
Yep.
And that was the intention. And the legal team would be myself and Andrew Cameron as the two people in the organisation who hold a practicing certificate. And so that was that intention. But yeah, again, discussed between Andrew and myself, our idea would be that if Claire had made the code of conduct complaint as the chief executive, that would be going to Preston Russell, simply because that would put Andrew and I in a position that people would assume we would back our chief executive. Whereas complaints from councillors, they can be things that can be dealt with, and as you said, there are things that are lower level, but to try and define that sufficiently to put in standing orders, the code of conduct, so that everybody knew whether this was in or out, is actually quite difficult. So I think so in terms of code of conduct complaints, something simple like name calling would potentially be at a lower level that we would be able to internally deal with. Serious accusations about a councillor's integrity or pecuniary interest or things like that, involving people's family members and things, that would be something that I would consider on the more serious level. But of course, it's always a matter of degree and through the circumstance that the code of conduct first came up from. So yeah, there's a continuum, and it's actually quite hard to put things on it until you've got them in place. But there are just a couple of examples from the top of my head.
So perhaps to help me further, are there examples from other councils that you're aware of, from your knowledge and experience, where there is that definitive line? Is there some examples that we could use? Or
look, there absolutely will be. We think we only need to look as far as Dunedin City Council from the last few terms with a certain very famous councillor. That code of conduct obviously went all the way to the Supreme Court. I think it's quite safe to say. So you've sort of got that at one end of behaviour, coming back to again, that sort of general name calling within the chamber, and there are code of conducts where that has been investigated. Yeah, and so those are sort of your two extreme. So the case from Dunedin obviously involved staff member and was bought, where that councillor was obviously very aggressive and confrontational to staff, and that was brought on by the chief executive from memory. So again, was at that more serious level of how that councillor conducted himself.
Yep. Yeah, Rangi.
Two things. I'll deal with the easy one first. I do agree that in-house with councillors is absolutely fine. I think that's a nice, clean. I have a lot of respect for both Andrew and Michael and being very professional, and I think anything involves the CE is immediately external. And that, to me, that's a no-brainer. You mentioned name calling. It's an interesting one because it takes me back to October 2014, where I was subject to actually verbal abuse. Now, I don't know whether name calling, trips up on that, and nothing ever evolved about the incident, and it was an interesting one. So just awaken an old wound.
I apologise.
No, that's fine.
Darren.
It was outside a meeting. Not that I was
Still
there.
in the council chamber.
This is the proverbial suspension of 20.6, Mr. Mayor, where I'm having a second bite at the cherry. I'm comfortable still with staff handling it more so because there's the staged approach, but because it's not being dealt with by one person.
Yep.
If we've got two practicing lawyers consulting with each other, then I think that should create a sufficient level of comfort for council.
Yep. Yeah, Tom.
Chair, I actually like Councillor Soper's proposal. The question then is, well, who makes the decision? And I would suggest that that would be a decision of the mayor, whether it's handled internally or externally, unless the mayor is subject to the complaint, in which case it would be handled.
Surely
by,
not.
The decision would be the deputy mayor.
Yep. Because the other option is we can use the independent chair of risk and assurance. So we've got one there that's neutral to all of this, and Bruce is a very skilled operator. So there are options that we have. So I guess, Michael, you're getting a bit of a blurred vision here in a little bit of way, but I guess what I'm picking up is that for low level disputes, I guess, between councillors, elected members, it would go to your team. Where it involved the chief executive, it would go to Preston Russell Law. And both of those allow for a preliminary investigation that doesn't set the pathway down the more formal one. Yeah, Grant?
Yeah, so what we're saying is, except where it's a complaint against the CE, all complaints initially would be screened through Andrew and Michael.
Correct.
Yep. And then they would be the decision point where it either is external or is dealt with internally.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that? Excellent. Nodding around the table. You got that, Michael?
Thank you.
How you get around wording that's another issue. On to page 112 of board books. There's some wording in there, Michael, that doesn't quite sit right with me. In 15.2.4, it says after the complaint is referred to the legal team, the parties to the complaint are advised. And I have some issue with that, being mindful that complaints go to the chief executive or to the chair of risk and assurance. I think people that are subject to or a code of conduct complaint should know before it gets referred on to the preliminary investigation that there is a complaint in place. So I guess a name change for me would be before the complaint is referred on, that the parties are advised that there actually is a complaint, because that was a problem with the previous system. It sort of said that it went to the chief executive and then it got referred on for some secondary action, but the litigants, as it were, didn't know what was going on. They got it sort of a bit secondhand, and if you think about personal grievances and things, it's important that you have that information up front. So I'm opening that up for discussion again. Grant, you're looking frown look on your face.
Thinking.
Thinking. It's good to think.
While he ponders, Mayor Clark, can I just point out that it's the Risk and Assurance Committee under 15.2, not the Risk and Assurance Committee.
Yeah,
It's a consistent one through that particular paragraph.
I picked it up. We were just making sure that people actually read our code of conduct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Ludlow. No, I apologise for that, and we will get it corrected.
Yep. So on page 114 on 15.2.16, it says we're investigating the complaint, the independent investigator. So this, I guess, is where we're into a more formal process. May consult with the complainant's respondents and affected parties, undertake a hearing of relevant parties, and refer to any other documents. I would have thought that may is too subjective. I mean, natural justice, and Leslie can guide us on that, would require that if you investigating a complaint between two parties, that both parties should be involved. You don't have a discretion to not do one of them. So any discussion around that?
So I've pondered.
Yeah, you've pondered,
Just,
yes.
Michael, if you could, in terms of, so if initially a complaint's made, then you would review that, and it's not against the CE, then you would review that and make a decision on whether it then would be investigated or it's just passed away.
No.
No.
No. Initially, when you make a complaint, it goes to the chief executive or the chair of risk and assurance, who then passes it on for a primary.
Okay, so once they've passed it on, they've decided it's something that needs to be investigated for.
And so what I was suggesting is before it gets passed on to the preliminary investigator, be it Michael's team or Preston Russell Law, if it involved the chief executive, the parties should be advised before that, not after it's been done.
Yeah, right, okay.
Yep. That's what I was initially
trying
suggesting.
to understand who the gatekeeper is to if a complaint's in.
The gatekeeper is the chief executive or the
head of risk insurance.
Risk and assurance chair. They're the people that actually get them.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
Okay.
So going back to that, Michael, just on that 15.2.16, Leslie, which is just the wording may.
Thank you. Are you suggesting that the may be changed to a must?
Yeah, or should, or whatever. No, it should be must. You can't do an investigation which is not a frivolous investigation. The fact that it's gone on to the full investigation means there's some material contents to it. It leaves it open to discretion that you could in some ways not discuss it with, if it's a mandatory thing to talk to both parties and any other affected party, because sometimes that happens. Rangi swears at me, we get a code of conduct, but there are other affected people involved in it.
I'm very comfortable to make that.
Yeah, Leslie?
My preference would certainly be that it said must in this case, because may does have a
discretion.
may and must do have legal
distinct
implications,
legal meanings,
and at this point it's gone to an independent investigator, so the must becomes unnecessary comprehensive wording.
So that's me done, unless there's other people that have trolled right through the document, which is reasonably extensive.
If we can just go back to your earlier remark,
Yes.
Which
Where are we?
Grant picked up.
Yep.
Are you suggesting a simultaneous referral on and information to the complainant and the respondent?
Well, if I think about two elected members having some sort of dispute and one of them lodges a complaint, it would primarily go to Claire. She's not involved. I would expect at that stage, before it went anywhere else, be it a way for Michael's team or to investigate preliminary, that the parties that are at odds should be advised there has been a complaint. Because you know the way this place works, the grapevine works really, really well. There's nothing worse than to hear things secondhand. And if you've worked in the area of employment law, which I have, and around that, it's very important when you get into these processes to be upfront very early on in the process. It creates problems if you don't, because processes are things that people hang their hats on of not being heard properly. So that's what I was suggesting.
So can I ask how long were you envisaging 15.2.3 would take that is giving you a concern?
What page are you on?
It's 112, 1523 and
Okay.
1524, that's the ones you were
Yeah.
suggesting. So on receipt of a complaint, Chief Executive or the Independent Chair of Risk and Assurance will refer that complaint to the legal team. And then 1524 says after the complaint is referred,
Yep.
Chief Executive or Independent Chair will inform the complainant and the respondent.
Yep. So
Are you worried about a time delay at 1523?
Yep.
Or
So-
are you...
So my view of that is that the parties should be advised before the referral is made for a preliminary investigation in the process.
So is your suggestion that on the receipt, the parties should be advised?
So
Or the
using
other party should be
yeah,
advised?
sure. So
One
if
party
Claire
obviously
receives one from me
knows.
against Nigel, first step is to advise both parties. Obviously, I already know, but to advise the other party, yes, there's been a complaint, and then it goes on for its preliminary investigation. Because one of the things about this is when Michael and his team have done their work, some of the outcomes are more conciliatory, and you see in the document that talks about maybe the mayor or a chair getting involved as part of a resolution from that low level stuff to make sure that we get past it. And so one thing that stops that sometimes if people feel as though they're left out of the process early on. So that's all I'd say is just change the word from after the referral to before the referral. Just a matter of timing.
It's an easy change to make,
Yep.
Mayor Clark.
Yep.
And it is appropriate that the person who has had the code of conduct made against them is aware of that.
Knows very early. Yep. Yep. Okie dokie. Any further discussion on the code of conduct? Everybody's Rangi, yes.
And just an interesting one on page 120. It's the Crimes Act 1961. Michael.
Mhm.
Now, the first bit is about receiving gifts and stuff, but the bit that interests me is it is also a crime for any elected member to use information acquired in their official capacity for monetary gain or advantage. Now, is that referring to information that's in a like public excluded format as opposed to public?
Yep.
Because obviously when you read below, the next bit's quite scary. These offences are punishable by a term of imprisonment of 7 years.
Yes.
Or more.
So can I suggest in there that an example of that might be that you might be party to some sensitive information around a tender that we've got or potential funding for a project, and you jump in and help a business that you own or somebody you know to put in a lower bid, for argument's sake. That sort of, you've got information that can benefit others but not benefit the organisation. That's an example.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and thank you, Mayor Clark, you're absolutely correct. And the reality is most of that will be public excluded information. If it's in the public realm, then people will know about it, but that it's always tempered by how much knowledge you have in addition to what is available in the public realm. But I suspect this will be, but this is the public excluded information, and Mayor Clark's example is a very good one. Another one is your
Just because obviously, using information acquired in their official capacity.
Yes.
I was just trying to get that clarity around.
So it covers everything, but your risk is your public excluded information.
Right. That's serious.
Any other discussion on the code of conduct? No, all going to sleep. All right, would somebody like to move and second the 3 recommendations that we have in front of us? Leslie, thank you.
Okay.
Grant, any discussion around those? So basically we're receiving the report, we're revoking the previous code of conduct, which is dated 2016, and adopting the 2022 code, which is set out in Appendix A. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any opposition? Done business. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is the adoption of the government statement. Quite a long document. Anything you'd like to initially contribute, Michael?
Just to point out, Mayor Clerk, that the governance statement will need to come back for further adoption once the final appointments to all the committees, such as the District Licensing Committee and the other council appointments, are completed. Other than that, it is a long document, but a necessary document that we must have, and we do continually update it as situations change.
Yep. So on page 144, you've already identified through an earlier document that Leslie would like to be on the Finance and Projects Committee.
Yes, that
So
will
that
be,
brings the numbers up to 3, 4, 6, 7,
those will be corrected.
as opposed to 8, given that I have the ability to be on there as well. I don't have anything else to raise in relation to that. Any further questions? Yes, Darren.
Sorry, happy to put myself forward to chair the hearings panel since I'm the only one with the qualification.
Yes, I saw that in there. And I think from memory we had 2 or 3 other people wanting to do the commissioner's work. You've got some control of that, I think.
Take all comers. So the more the merrier.
Yeah. Rhea had discussed it. She was interested.
Yes.
Trish has. And I think there was a third one.
Barry.
Peter has.
I was interested in
with
licensing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know about that.
Rigorous.
I'm a rigorous person.
Excellent.
Yeah, rigorous. Rangy.
I have an issue on page 147, and that is with the WasteNet appointments. Now, I'm under the impression that it's going the way of the dinosaur WasteNet. It's going to be, it's no longer going to be a tri-council governance thing. It may remain a tri-council management agreement, but I see no point in appointing people. I'm not sure what the other 2 councils are doing, but I'm strongly against the continuance of that governance group for, well, I don't want to get into it here, but I would object to that continuance.
Yes, I think in one of our further papers that we've got, there's quite a bit of overlap into your infrastructure committee now. That's where we want it to go. So yeah, we can address that as we get down to the appointments, which will come later than this, about whether we want to still participate in that framework or not.
Okay.
Certainly would be my view that it hasn't added a lot of value.
No.
That we're better off doing it ourselves.
No, absolutely. Thank you.
Yep. All right, any further discussion on the adoption of the governance statement 2022-25? There being none, somebody would like to move and second that we accept those?
Bit of move.
Yep, thank you, both councillors. Any opposition to that or any discussion? None, there being none. I'll put all 3 at the same time. All those in favour say aye.
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 Carried. Now we move on to the issue of mana whenua representation, roles and responsibility, 2022-25. So I'll lead this a little bit. So I've had some involvement in it already. I've had discussion with both whenua leadership. So I've had Dean in from Aurora and Cyril and Joe in from Waihopai, and explained that we're moving our decision making away from committees and into the full council, which is what we used to have before we got to the last triennium. And we all know the reasons why we moved downwards. So that then the question becomes, at what stage do the mana whenua reps have an involvement? So clearly at this stage they remain on the committees that they were on before, which is the 2 big committees, and have voting rights there. The issue for us to decide on is whether they participate but don't vote at the governance level, or whether they don't do either. They can't vote at the governance level, at the decision-making body. The Act does not allow for that. But it's whether they have a voice there without a vote. So I'll open that up for discussion shortly. I have discussed with all 3 leaders that came to see me that I'm uncomfortable about speaking but not voting on several levels. One of the issues I discussed with them is it doesn't sit right in the public eye that we have non-elected members on that board. And we got a lot of feedback over the election campaign about that. The other issue is it doesn't sit well for me if mana whenua are allowed to talk but can't vote. That seems to be a bit of a double standard in my view. They say they should either be both or neither. But the wording of the purpose and the summary on page, whatever we're on, page 163, for me is a little bit vague, Michael. It just doesn't quite identify where they can speak but not vote. So I'd like to go around the table and see how people feel about that. Because in the recommendations as we go forward, there are 2 recommendations that I would personally be opposed to, which is recommendation 5 and 7 as well. But before we do that, if we could just touch on what our feelings are or views are on the role of mana whenua on the council itself. Yeah, Darren.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. Look, I'm happy to kick off, and I guess I'd like to share with councillors that the mana whenua representatives are appointees.
Yeah.
They're not elected members like us, but they are appointed. And it's no different to if we look at the previous DHBs. And Councillor Soper will recall that there were people on the DHBs who were both elected and those who were government appointees. We know because of the Act that they can't have a vote at full council. There's absolutely no question of that at all. But I think because there's a distance of a week or a fortnight between the discussions at the committees and when items come up again at full council, it would be useful to have the mana whenua viewpoints reflected at the meeting, and that's why I don't have an issue with speaking rights at full council, but understand that there aren't voting rights. I'm silent on point 7.
Yeah. All right, Leslie.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. At the risk of being second of third speakers, possibly.
No, we're going to have everybody's view on this one. I have to tell you.
Bringing up our standing order issue.
Yeah.
20.6.
I'm also going to speak in favour of the principles with which we agreed to the appointment of mana whenua representatives. We're all well aware that the Act doesn't allow non-elected members to vote at the council table. Mana whenua reps have sat at the council table in our last term and spoken often with exceptional value on issues and have then not, of course, been able to vote. I'm in favour that we leave number 5 as resolving that we continue the appointment on full council. I would even go as far as to say and speaking rights, but as non-voting members. If you want to be explicit about the non-voting membership, which is in the Act. On recommendation 7, I am certainly in favour of confirming the honoraria to remain as it is.
Yeah, I'll come back to 7 in a minute because there's some further developments with that, which I've discussed with iwi itself. So, Rangi.
Right, I would. My preferred option is that mana whenua reps are on the 2 main committees, but not on council. The reason being is that we've just gone through an election, and it's a harrowing time for all those who stood. Put a lot of, and there's a lot of people who didn't get on, who put a lot of effort into it. Now, to me, that sets the bar of elected members of being at the top table, and that the input for the 2 main committees, mana whenua reps still have, and that input is valued. But I see 2 stages. One is advisors, and then the next one is you have elected final decision makers who sit at the table. And to me, that is the way I see it. And, you know, if you look at what, as I repeat again, what the elected members went through over the last few months, and they do it every 3 years, I'm quite strong about that.
Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I believe that we should have a presence here with mana whenua reps, but I honestly believe that they should sit in the peripheral, the same as staff members do. And when we require advice or clarification, as we do with staff members, they can then be invited by the chair to sit at the top of the table and go through whatever issues or information that we require from them, and then they take their place back where they come from, in the peripheral.
Thank you for that.
Like members of the public can only have a say if they at public forum, and they've got 5 minutes. So yeah, that's what I'd like to say. I'd like to talk about the honorarium, but do you say that's coming up after?
Come back to it in a minute. I just want to finish the discussion around this number 5. So it was remiss of me to not share some information. One of the issues I've spoken to with the leadership of both Renagas, and I think one of the reps has asked me, I think Pania has someone on the line, is what happens when we go into public excluded? Are the mana whenua reps, and you've touched on this, public, and do they have to leave or do they stay? My view of that, Will, and it's only my view, is that we should treat them the same way as the external advisors we had, that we record in the meeting that they stay, because while they may or may not be able to participate, if they're not able to participate, they should still be here to hear what goes on. It's a bit disempowering to be part of a submission that comes forward from a committee and then have to leave the room and not hear what the decision is. I think that's not a good process. So just a reflection on that. But we need to go around the table and ask people. This is one of the toughies for us to decide on. I'm just doing a bit of a count here so that I get some idea where we're going to go to and how we resolve this. So I'll just go around the room. Grant?
I'm supportive of mana whenua having representation at full council.
Yeah. Okay. So that means they participate, but they don't vote.
Yes.
Correct. Tom?
I think if we were debating this as a exercise in civics for the first time, I think the points that you made would be powerful. I do, however, feel as though since mana whenua did attend council last time, to actually remove them is a step, I think, in my view, a step too far. Yep. So I would support mana whenua attending full council meetings with speaking rights but not voting rights. Yep. And I do take Councillor Kate's suggestion, and I'm trying to think how that would work, but maybe as we go around the table we can flush that out a little bit.
Yep. So, and just as a comment to that, and I'm not wanting to debate or undermine what you've said, one of the issues we faced last time was that because we had our decision making down at the committee level, so that was where we can add people, including mana whenua. That's where I think it got a little bit complicated, and that's the issue we now face. They're still on the committees, but they're not on, if we went against this motion, they're not on the decision-making body. So that's for us to decide today is where we want to go on that. Trish?
I support the concept that they are at the table having discussions, but obviously not voting.
Okay. Amy spoken. Nigel?
We either respect and value the voice or we don't. It's quite simple.
Yeah. So that's in favour?
Yep.
Okay. Alan?
Oh, well, I'm sort of thinking about it. I think I'm pretty happy for them to be at the committee level, but I think when it comes to full council, where the legislation says that they don't get to vote, I think by them being able to actually speak freely, like as a councillor, it could unduly influence decision making at that level. I'm not too sure. Maybe that's the purpose of the legislation. So I'm probably more inclined for them to be, very happy for them to be here. Very happy for them to give advice, but I think they shouldn't partake in the actual discussions of council at council, full council.
Barry?
Yeah, I'm of the same opinion of Alan, actually. I'm quite happy for mana whenua to be at the committee stages and be invited here to sit and listen, and if they've got an opinion, yeah, sure, they can bring their opinion, but they're not going to be able to have a vote anyway, so it's my opinion on it.
So for those who haven't been counting, that's 2, 4, 6 in favour and 5 against. So it'll be my recommendation that we leave this recommendation on the table. We've got two members away today. This is too contentious an issue to be running through with majorities like that, and it's not me trying to get it over the line, don't get me wrong. I just think we need some more time to think about and allow Ria and Alex to both come back in the picture. So I'm happy to have some discussion around that as well, unless you want to actually have a vote today. So, Mayor, every time we come to a consensus or a difficult decision, we're going to put it off?
I'm not saying that.
No, I'm asking.
But if we want, as others have said before, if you want an inclusive council and you know you've got people away and it's a contentious issue, you can do an awful lot of damage if you don't buy their voice into the process as well. But I'm happy to put it today. You know where my stand is on this, and I'm quite happy to put it forward.
I'd like to hear from the rest of the council.
Sure. Yeah, Rangi.
Look, I think this sets the next 3 years, and because of that, the sake of a couple of weeks, I have no problem with that, because it is such an important decision, and when it is 5-6 and you've got two important voices to hear, I think it's important that you do that, because there is no rush that it is done today, and it's not delaying it, or this is not setting a precedent for other things. This is like the inaugural meeting is the inaugural meeting, and things like this get sorted out here. So I'm in favour of what the mayor is trying to do.
So yeah, I'll come back to you in a minute, Peter. In relation to that, I mean, I don't have a penny both ways on this issue. I hear what you're saying, Nigel, because every meeting we come to, a decision-making meeting, we will have people absent. And I guess one of the issues is if you're absent, your vote is not cast. Otherwise, a chair or a mayor could delay stuff just to get numbers back, and you can see that in Dunedin in the last term over the Three Waters issue. So I definitely don't want to set a precedent for that. So I'm open to whether we put today or not. Quite happy to do that. Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we delay the decision until we get our other two councillors back at a meeting, we may well have one or two of us that's not at that meeting. So we're going to end up in the same position.
Sure.
So I believe we should take the vote today.
Okay. Darren?
I'm in favour of postponing it, because I'm tremendously confident both councillors have very strong opinions on the issue.
Yep. And that was certainly my take as well. But there is also the precedent if we delay, because we don't have the numbers here, and if I delay today and I'm in opposition to mana whenua having a voice as well as not being able to vote, then I leave myself open to criticism that because I didn't have the numbers, I can manipulate things, and I definitely don't want down that track for sure. Rangi.
Look, there's only one inaugural meeting a term, and this is it. And I think because of that, you have the flexibility.
Yep.
The rest of the meetings aren't the same.
Okay, gotta make it. Oh, Leslie.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, did you call me?
Yeah, I did. Yes.
Oh,
sorry. Yeah,
sorry, I just didn't hear you. Must have the same problem as Councillor Kett there.
Oh, well, I wasn't going to mention that.
Not old age, is it?
I suppose since you're asking for the feelings on this, I would agree with Councillor Scout that it is an issue of such importance that we probably need to take the vote today. It is possible at every meeting that some councillors are away on some important issues. If we set any sort of precedents that votes throughout our term are delayed in the hopes that people who are apologies will be present, then we will have every issue being put off for a meeting or another meeting.
Okay, so let me work it another way then. I'll have a show of hands of those who wish to put the vote today on issue number 5, recommendation number 5, and if that's in the majority, we'll run with that.
Who wants to put the vote today?
Today, yep. That doesn't want a delay. I have the option of potentially delaying it, but if you want it today, let's have a show of hands, and if we get the majority of that, we'll run with it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 5. You get that count?
Well, I see your hand going up and coming down again.
Yeah, sorry, I was too quick.
1, 2, 3,
4, 5, 6.
6. How many opposed? Still,
That's a majority.
that's the majority. Yep. Okay. Well, then we'll run with it today. Yep. Live with the consequence of that. on the issue of recommendation.
So what was the result? Sorry about that.
Well, the result was a majority want the vote carried today.
Carried today. Okay.
Yep. On the issue of number 7, I did raise with the iwi leadership around the issue of the honorarium, and I said to them that there was some unease with elected members that feel that Mana Whenua reps should not get the same as a full council rate. We debated this last year and it created some issues. That other councils do sort of split arrangement where Ngāi Tahu pays some of the rate and council pays the other rate, and ECAN's a good example of that. And so I said to them that we would look to resolve this issue before the end of the year. I don't want it to go into 2023, which is what the paper says, that we should be brave enough to make the decision early. And so the range of options that I put to the leadership was that a full council rate was one, a lesser rate was another, a 50% rate with Ngāi Tahu contributing was another, and another option would be to have a per meeting rate that could be decided on. But at that stage, we hadn't seen the workload of being involved with full council without voting rights. So I guess my view is that that should not be dragged out till next year. The Mana Whenua reps have a right to know what's coming, if there is to be any change. Because the issue is that good news is coming forward for us is we've actually got a pay increase coming as elected members. So one of the issues will be, I guess, is that then bumps up the Mana Whenua rate as well, quite considerably. So, Peter.
I believe we should discuss that today and not put it off. And I've got other reasons too, but I'll speak later if you wish.
Yep. I guess one of the issues is that we have a range of 4 or 5 different options that we could use to pay a Mana Whenua rep or to create an honorarium. I think it's not just something we can decide on today. It's my own personal view, because part of the resolution may be to talk to Ngāi Tahu as well about what they may or may not contribute. And where we go from this, I think it would be disrespectful to not engage them. I did signal the issues, but I said that we'd come back to them. So I'm a little bit bound by that. To not go back would be disrespectful to the issues I put forward. Rangi.
I don't think we can. Actually can't vote on it today because we don't have the options in front of us, and the options, as you said, need to be researched. So you can't say the 50-50 thing if that is not even possible. No. We don't even have another option below the base rate. So we're just picking stuff out of the air.
Yep.
So we actually can't do it today.
Sure.
Without information.
Yeah, Tom.
Chair, I presume that status quo continues until there's some other resolution?
It does, yes, absolutely. That was the intention in Michael's paper. It said it would continue until 2023. But if you think that through, if that was to be 1 July 2023, given that's when our new fiscal year starts, and we pay for this out of our operating costs, this is not something that comes from central government, it would be a bit difficult to justify paying somebody at the current rate for 6 or 7 months and then suddenly say, oh, we want it to be dropped down.
Yeah. Well, sorry, through you again, Chair. What I was meaning was that if it takes several months to resolve the question, you know, how do those individuals get paid in the meantime? And I was suggesting that the existing would continue.
That's what Michael's paper does say that. Yep, for sure. Leslie.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to clarify, and I suppose it's in line with what Tom's just asked. Are you suggesting that we put recommendation 7 as it currently stands, but you are saying that there may be an options paper by the end of the year?
Correct.
That would reconsider that matter?
Yep, I don't think we should leave it. It needs to be done quickly.
I would certainly agree option 7 would give the confirmation today that I
Yep.
believe is necessary.
Yep.
And if you're then signalling a future paper may come,
Yep.
then we may be discussing at a later stage, but option 7 would
Yep.
give the certainty we need for today.
Sure. So, Michael, what's the time frame that we could move the potential options to consider? Do you think? What's a reasonable time frame? Possible to do it before the end of the year?
There's no reason to consider why not. There are lots of examples out there now. Some of that would also depend, Mayor Clark, on your ability to communicate with Ngāi Tahu leadership.
Can do that.
But I would expect the last meeting of the year, late December, would be an opportune time.
Yep. Darren.
So thank you, Mayor Clark. With that clarification then, and an indication that people want to take a vote today, I'll test the meeting and move the 7 recommendations as they stand.
Okay. Second
And
for
I'll
that.
second those.
Leslie. Any further discussion on that?
So just as a point of clarification, that is continuing the appointment of the mana whenua representatives on full council as non-voting advisory members.
At this time.
No. The at this time is around payment.
Yep, it is. So, Michael, just your advice on Resolution 2, because Resolution 2 specifically names the reps. And I just wonder whether that's our call to make or whether that's an iwi call to make. So, for argument's sake, if we appoint them now, are we assuming that the iwi have communicated with us that they're the 2 people I want? And I'm not being pedantic about that, but it just
absolutely.
seems as though we're making a call on an area that doesn't belong to us.
No, thank you, Mayor Clark, for that. So the iwi reps, when they were mana whenua reps, when they were appointed for terms of 3 years from the mana whenua point of view. So that, of course, transcends a council triennium. So that these people will, both Ms. Coot and Reverend Cook, will continue as representatives as long as they are reappointed by this council. Should the Runaka wish to change their representative, then that would be an approach to us, and a further paper would come, because to appoint people to the committees, you have to appoint named people. You can't appoint a representative of the Wahopa Runaka, for example.
Yep. Okay, thank you for that. So, Darren, you put the motion. Leslie, you've seconded the motion. Any further discussion on that? Oh, Peter,
So
yes?
we're voting for what's up on the board there. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Yep.
So if I didn't vote for that, it didn't mean to say that I'd be voting for the alternative, because I've put up what I'd said earlier, that I said that we need a presence here, but I only wanted them sitting in the peripheral and asked to speak when we needed them to speak.
Well,
we've
hang on.
decided on that.
No, let me talk to that, please. Look, it's a one or all. You can't have a penny both ways. If mana whenua are going to be on full council with non-voting rights but speaking rights, you can't put them in the second row of the organisation. That treats them like a staff member. What I was suggesting before was, if they weren't allowed to speak in the committee, full council, and therefore couldn't vote either way, that they could still have a presence in the room if we went into things like PE, where I'd still want them to know the outcome of what they'd recommended from the committee, because that would be inappropriate to exclude them out of that. But if you're going to have them on council, then they sit at the table like everybody else, and they act the same way as everybody else. They can talk and debate, but they just can't vote. Now, I'm not an expert on the Local Government Act, so I'm seeking your guidance here, and possibly Darren and Rangi as well. So I just want to be sure in our mind that if we appoint to a discussion point, that they can be on council and discuss, that we're not breaching that act, because some of the wording in your paper is, to me, is a little bit subjective. It talks about things like giving act to certain types of things, and so it talks about giving support to iwi's ability to be involved in decision making. Now, that doesn't go forward to say that they are actually involved with the decision making. It just means you're giving them some ability to influence, I guess. And at what level do we influence? So I just want to be sure that if we go down the track of appointing them to full council with non-voting rights, that we're not going to get tripped up anywhere.
No, so council is able, as has been said many times, only elected members may vote at full council.
Yep.
Council can have advisory members sitting on it who can speak, but they can't vote. Voting is the important part and the role of council, and it is for council to decide who they wish to listen to when they're making up who to decide to listen to when they're making up their minds before voting. So there is the Local Government Act is otherwise silent on this. It specifically provides for voting rights to be provided to appointees to committees, but is otherwise silent, sitting on council as to who can speak at the table, but is very clear as who can vote.
Yep. So, yep, Alan.
I was just going to say that there's a wee bit of a issue here. You're talking about them sitting on as advisory members of the council. Is that a different role to partaking in full debate at council? Is there a difference here, or is it
the terminology for mana whenua is appointed members. So
if are they advisors, or do they partake in full?
They get from what Michael's now telling us,
two different things.
As an appointed member of this council, as opposed to an elected member, they can participate in discussion around the full council table, but they can't vote on an issue. So, and I heard somebody say before, but does that leave them open to encouraging us to go one way or the other? Well, that's the case, and if you don't like that, then you have some fortitude and you just don't agree with what they say. So they are appointed under the terminology that's in here, appointed member, and the issue for us is whether we, with the act, which is silent for me on that, allows us in good spirit to engage them at the full council level. So I'd like to get your view on that, Darren, and yours as well, Rangi. Not trying to put you on the spot, but just...
No, well, the example that I'd go back to is when we had Jeff Grant and Lindsay McKenzie here.
Yep.
They sat on the table, they contributed, joined in, and didn't vote. And they would be deemed as advisors, I suppose, or you know, I don't know what the other
external
word
advisors.
Yeah, they were here for a reason, but we got the tables extended because of them.
Yep.
And it's good.
Darren,
I see no difference.
It's a personal view, but I feel I would like to hear what mana whenua representatives have to say.
Yep.
Ultimately, each councillor makes up their own decision when they cast a vote.
Yep.
I value the relationship and want to hear the voice.
Yep, appreciate that. One of the issues that I spoke with the leadership about was us not hearing the voice sometimes. So certainly at the committee level, mana whenua's voice gets caught in a whole lot of other chatter, for want of better words, and our minutes are often very non-specific. So they just say there's been a discussion, and I go back and look at some of the previous meetings, and I can't determine what mana whenua's actually said in some of these key issues. So that's a challenge for us, and it reinforces what you said, Darren. So yep, I'm happy to put the votes. I just want to make sure we've got the nominees, the mover and seconder. We got that?
I moved.
Yep.
I seconded.
Okay. Any further discussion before we go to the vote? Okie dokie. All those in favour? In fact, it might be helpful. Sorry, Darren. Rangi.
I'm going to vote against the motions because of the reason that I believe the vote should have been suspended. The other two members to be here for this particular item. So, so that's, I don't know if you can record that, but that's the reason.
Oh, I'm quite happy to record that. I think that's,
that's
good
the
to
reason
record
I'm
that.
voting against it because of.
Or are you abstaining?
No, I'm not abstaining.
Yeah, it's okay to be opposed.
No.
Yep.
No.
It's okay.
Not
So
abstaining.
I just want to show hands on this one so we're quite clear that there's not any division on it. All those in favour? Raise their right hands. Yep. And opposed? There's two of us. Do you want it recorded?
Yeah.
Yep, two recorded against. Majority voters in favour. That's where we've landed, folks. Good process. Okay, moving on to the Risk and Assurance Committee membership. You again, Michael?
Yes.
Anything you'd like to alert us to in this one?
This is a continuation of Auditor General's advice that we have an independent chair of our Risk and Assurance Committee and an independent member. Bruce Robertson has filled that role as the chair, and Ross Jackson as the independent chair, and we're recommending that that is continued, but for a shorter period of time, for a 12-month appointment this time.
Yep.
Outside of that, there's, I don't believe, too much else for me to add.
Yep. So just to alert you to a couple of things in here. One is that I did suggest that we have it for a 12-month period only to see where we land going forward. It's good that Bruce is okay with that, because I think he wanted a longer period. And also to note in the financial implications, the cost of having the two independent people in, which is not an excessive cost, in my view. Something worth having. As a wider reflection on this committee, and we do have members with their hands up to be on this committee, you'll know that last term we had an awful lot of stuff going past this committee, massive amounts. I think one meeting was 5 hours long. And so one of the things I'd like us to develop as we go forward is for the chairs, especially the two main chairs of the two big committees, to have some discussion with Bruce about what our level of risk is on issues that need to go to the committee and what needs to just go directly to council. And I know there'll be staff members that say every piece of work's got a risk attached to it, and that's true, but not every piece needs to go to a risk in the insurance committee. We've got way too much going there. In fact, just about everything goes there. So that's just, I guess, a little bit of a backdrop to where we go to. Is there any discussion around the issues that are raised in that we have? We received the report that we have an independent chair and an independent member, which is Ross. No debate. Oh, Rangi, yes.
Just talking with the last few risk and insurance meetings, there's been a massive amount of audit stuff. Now, that audit stuff, will it go to grants committee? The audit, the annual report, signing off of that?
Mr. Mayor, that has to go to the Risk and Insurance Committee because it has the relationship with audit.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
But you're right, it's not a good process at the moment, and that's something we need to review as well, I think.
As in relationship, as in historic relationship?
I just think when you look at our relationship with Audit New Zealand and how slow they are to deliver and how we get boxed in with everything, our finance people must be pulling their hair out at times.
Wouldn't you think the finance committee would deal with?
Mr. Mayor, the Finance Committee will deal with monitoring of financial performance throughout the year.
Yeah.
Yep.
The annual report matters goes to Risk and Insurance.
Yep.
Okay. Just that this is obviously on previous councils I've been on. It was completely different.
Yeah.
I think through you, Mayor, the role and risk profile has shifted since then.
Yep.
And I think given the polite Kiwi understatement, testy relationship that we've had with audit over these past 2 years, and the skill set that Mr. Robertson has, I'm very keen for it to remain as is.
Okay. I'm going to let a young Michael speak now. I can see him out of the corner of my eye.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Just like to remind Council that the risk and assurance is actually just providing a recommendation to Council about the risks that are within the annual report. It is Council that is signing off the annual report, not risk and assurance.
But you're right about the 5 hours. Now you're sitting through that, without lunch. It's pretty tough.
Yeah.
And I mean, and then the following risk and assurance was 4 hours. And I cannot believe we either need to space the workload or something, because it doesn't make any sense.
Yep. So I've spoken to I got you, Nigel. I've spoken to Bruce about this, and at the last meeting that we had on risk and assurance, he did say that going forward, that was one of the issues he wanted to do, was to look at some way of gatekeeping out some of that stuff that doesn't need to go there. Because a lot of it seems to go through a committee, onto risk and assurance, and then back to council. Like there's 3 bites at the cherry, and I just wonder about the rationale for that. And one of the things I've suggested to him, as I said before, which he hasn't agreed to yet, but we'll have some discussion about it, is whether the chairs of the bigger committees actually make decisions at the end of council meetings about what needs to go down that path and what doesn't need to go down that path. Nigel.
I was just reiterating what you said, thank you, and you're giving a clear indication that risk and assurance will be streamlined.
Yep.
Yep. So if you can do that, that'll be sensational.
But on the flip side of it, we do need a very good lens across our finances and our projects. So hence the Finance and Projects Committee, because I think that's an area we haven't done well in the past. Kept on top of our finances, because it's no good doing it at the end of the year when you've already got a blowout. If you get it at the 3-month stage, you get an ability to be agile on what the costs are going forward. So unless there's no other further discussion, somebody like to move and second. Yep, thank you.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Leslie. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried, thank you. And you again, Michael?
Nearly there, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So this one is the adoption of our delegations register. So one of the points just been discussed is risk and assurance. The delegations register from council sets out what risk and assurance as a committee is able to consider. It also sets the finance delegations for council staff. They are contained within the second part of that. Just as a point of clarification for all the councillors, to remind the returning councillors and for the new councillors, there are a number of delegations from the Chief Executive to staff to enable the efficient running of council. This register isn't approved by council, it is approved by the Chief Executive, but once it is finalised for this term, it will be brought through to council for information so that you're aware of what those delegations are, but they are delegations that are made by the Chief Executive. So these are delegations, for example, under the Resource Management Act, as opposed to decisions that council makes. So I just put that as a little caveat. And outside of that, happy to answer any questions, noting that the corrections that have already been made to the governance statement will be carried over to this document.
So 2 issues for me, Michael. On page 184, under the delegations to the Infrastructure Committee, it says road stopping, closing and street naming. So my personal view is the latter is not appropriate. Street naming is not something that's urgent. It should be done, in my view, at the full council level. If I'm open, there has been some contention around that in the last term from mana whenua delegates who felt that we should have more Maori names in streets. That was the first thing. Up against the tradition that we've had in council where the person that develops the land puts forward names. So I think that's a careful balance that we should not delegate the decision to a committee. It should come to full council. That's not to say they don't consider it and make a recommendation. I'm fine with that, but I guess I'm a little bit uneasy about the decision sitting in a committee which won't involve all members than being on council which does involve all members. And on the next page, which is 185, under financial delegations for the Community and Wellbeing Committee, which is Darren's committee, it says financial delegations to approve expenditure above the authority delegated to the Chief Executive and to approve expenditure not approved in the long-term plan or annual plan. And I just wonder what that means, given it's at committee level.
No, apologies, Mr. Mayor, that was meant to have been removed. My understanding is that the committees do not have any financial delegations. It all sits with council.
That's fine.
So I would seek to delete that from the document. Oh, and since I'm making another correction, the oversight of cemeteries and the crematorium was intended to be with community wellbeing, not infrastructure. So that would be swapped as well.
Yep, thank you.
Another addition.
And the last one for me, which is the area that Rangi got into earlier on, is on page 190 onwards. Sorry, it might be 189 onwards, which is the Joint Advisory Waste Net Group. I mean, there's an awful lot of information in here, and it just seems to me that some of it seems to be superseded by our desire to deal with this matter as an internal matter for for infrastructure. And on page 191, it refers to exercise the waste net extension pursuant to clause 2.5. In fact, it mentions that in A and B, and I can't actually find the reference of 2.5. When I go back to 2.5, it says little or nothing.
So that would be, sorry, Mr. Mayor, that would be the waste net agreement.
Okay.
That's a reference. So this, when the waste net was set up, these were the delegations that were pulled straight across from that document.
Sure.
And as ever, if the council wishes to change the waste net arrangements, then a further paper can be requested to make those changes. in due course, and that would of course update things like our governance statement and our delegations register at that time should WasteNet be, for example, discontinued. I'm also mindful that often bodies need people appointed to them to terminate them, and I'm thinking of the legislative chamber as the upper house of our parliament that had a similar effect. It needed people appointed to end its term. So it is something that will need to be dealt with, and a paper can be called upon from our infrastructure team in due course.
So I'm just going to, you don't need to put your hand up now, Rangi. I know where you're coming from. I'm just going to give Rangi the opportunity to give some feedback on that, because we've had some discussions before about this, about the whole WasteNet concept and where we might want to go, which might help you give you a bit of a steer on that. Rangi.
Well, I mean, we had the failure of WasteNet providing a waste minimisation management plan, as statutory law has them do. Now, this is a critical thing, and I would like to remove that and go back to page 183 and actually have recycling included under the infrastructure delegations on page 183, as well as solid waste landfill, etc. Those delegations come under there, and regardless of what WasteNet is or maybe, or at least the full delegations come back to infrastructure for those issues.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the contract that's away from recycling, which is the bond pickup contract, is that still managed by 3 councils under WasteNet?
Correct.
It is, isn't it? So they've got other work other than just the recycling and the issues you talk about.
Yeah, well, so that ultimately needs to come back to infrastructure.
So it's your recommendation that all those contracts that are currently sitting in that WasteNet parcel, for want of a better word, should come back to us, and that means it will go back individually to the other councils who have a shareholding in that.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the current setup with WasteNet, we can't here today dissolve those. That's the only unfortunate thing. I just don't want to put us in a position today that stops us moving forward because of these delegations.
Yep. So I guess the advice you're getting from the chair is that we need some advice going forward about how we manage the whole WasteNet group, which is
very like as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me, Chair.
Sure.
I have committed to Councillor Pottinger in his role as Infrastructure Chair under the previous council that we would bring a paper back to the December council meeting outlining the path, the review of WasteNet and the potential path to dissolving some of those elements.
Yeah, it's certainly been my observation the last 4 or 5, 6 years now. We just haven't kept up to speed with waste in general. We've just got problems all over the place, and that's no reflection on staff. It's just the way the industry and the government's moving around these issues. So it'd be good for us to have a good handle on that. Rangi?
Well, effectively, when you look at the makeup of WasteNet, you had 2 councillors from ICC, 2 from Gore, 2 from Southern District. So you had 4 councillors outside of our own area telling us how to run our own system.
Sure.
And nothing came more clear when we had the issue back in 2019 with the recycling contract. Now, ICC should be able to decide its own recycling contract. Sorry, and that's just an example.
Yeah. So Aaron's commitment to the paper will give us that.
No, I appreciate that.
Go forward. Yep. Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I was actually just going to say what Aaron had said and remind Council that there had been that commitment, and just point out that at the moment on page 183 the WasteNet Joint Committee is under the scope of activities of infrastructure, and that seems to give the perfect ability for the moving on once that paper has arrived. So until then there's some sense in the delegation register saying what it does, and that, as our advisor has pointed out, can be altered as new decisions are made.
Is that okay with you, Rangi?
Yeah.
Yep, thank you. Any other discussion on that? This has been a difficult area. All right, if somebody would like to move the motions, and there are 3 of them. Receive the report, adoption of the delegations register, revoke the
previous one, version 2, and adopt the new register 2022 as set out in Appendix A.
I'll move that way.
Thank you,
Mr.
Leslie. Darren, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Mayor. Aye.
Carried. Michael again.
Second to last one, Mr. Mayor. So this is a new provision following on from changes to the Local Government Act requiring the adoption of a pecuniary interest register. The legislation, the changes to the Local Government Act come in and take effect later this month and will require the register to be up and running in February. So this is the first stage of that, which is to create the register and appoint the registrar. That is going to be me in my capacity, and any successors to title that may occur. I'm not expecting a new title, just putting that out there. And so the only question we've got there is at number 4 is whether you would seek to have appointed members. So this is mana whenua and also Mr. Robertson and Mr. Jackson from Risk and Assurance, whether they would also be asked to complete those forms in the interests of open democracy. The Act doesn't require appointed members to do it, but it's a consideration for this council as to whether they would request those members to do it for openness and transparency. So outside of that, I'm happy to answer any questions on this one.
Sure, my personal preference in 4 is to confirm. I think if we look back on some of the issues we've had around people that have been attached to our council in the past, there have been some question marks. That's no reflection on Bruce or anybody else. I just think it would be healthy to have that. I think we would operate with our eyes open. Darren?
I agree. Happy to move all forward with confirm.
So for you, Chair, the word asked is not the same as the word require.
Yeah.
So asked means that someone can say no.
Yeah.
And I mean, I actually support the word asked. I mean, I think we recommend, or ask actually is probably the right word, that somebody completes the form. If they say they do not wish to, then I think, that seems to be the legal right.
Mm.
So I'm agreeing with 4. I'm just pointing out that
Yep.
asked is not the same as require.
Yep.
Yeah, I used that word for a reason and you've identified it.
Yep. So are you
Happy to second the
that we should
Councillor
have the
Ludlow's
word require
No,
or not?
no, just ask.
No.
Right.
As it stands.
confirm.
So just fleshing that out for a minute, Tom. So what happens if we ask an appointed member to fill out the register and they refuse?
It doesn't show up.
But that creates a risk for us, doesn't it?
No, for the member it does.
It's the same with the councillor.
Yes, so
We're required to.
No, we're required to, aren't we?
No. So, Mr. Mayor, just for some clarification there, the members aren't required to,
Okay.
but if you don't, then you may be prosecuted by the Secretary for Local Government. So but the penalty isn't such, it's a fine of up to $5,000. It's not a remove from office kind of penalty.
Yeah.
So you're not required to, but there is a potential consequence for not. I'm not sure why the government chose the wording that way, but that's how the legislation has fallen.
Okay. All right. So Darren and Leslie have both moved on 4 to confirm. Okay. Any further discussion on that? There being none. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you very much. You said it was the last one, Michael? Second last one.
Second to last one. The last one before public excluded. Something slightly more entertaining and appealing, I'm sure. Committing your lives until the rest of the to the end of the year for our council meetings. So that is the proposed schedule sitting there. That does not include any extraordinary meetings that may need to be set in place, with the exception of the final meetings on the 20th of December, which may be subject to movement depending on when audit report back to us. So the 20th is our optimistic, fingers crossed, this is when we expect it, but you need to be prepared for just in case.
Yep. Thank you.
We had that rivalry. Thought we were being very clear.
We always make sure that there are buffers.
See, you kept it 25th.
Yeah, right. Yep. I remember signing the annual report on the last day of the year before Christmas. Terrible.
So any discussion around that? There being none, a mover and a seconder.
I'll move that.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Done business? All right. We're out of the council. No. Oh, public excluded. Yep, thank you. We are too.
And the finance and project public is
Yep. So thank you to those that have attended, and to Louisa and Logan and co.
So, if you,
Oh yes, thank you, Darren, for moving and seconding that we go into.
Forgive me for speaking with my mouth full.
Yeah. Oh, what?
Mr Mayor, do we need to add the mana whenua rep stays in the room because one of them is in the room?
We've already approved them to sit on full council, haven't we?
Yeah, just wanted to make sure we didn't need
Yeah,
to
yeah.
put that in the public exclusion.
Join the table. Join the table.
Chair here.
All right.